Okay, so this is Introduction to Psalms. Psalms were a huge innovation that David introduced in liturgical worship, right? Before David, it is thought, because nobody was there with a camera, we don't know, but it is thought that the original Mosaic worship was a very kind of a quieter affair, more silent worship, reverence, awe, etc. Whereas David, who was a man after God's own heart, remember that, introduced the sort of singing and swinging from the rafters concept of worship, right? So he introduced lively, loud, sung, liturgical chanting and singing and worship, okay? That's a huge point, which I think we don't really realize when we think about David, right? We know many other things about David, but perhaps we didn't know that his was the original idea of singing songs in worship. Well, that's not true. You know, there may have been songs sung in other types of worship, in other types of cults, but for as far as the religion of Israel is concerned, his was just a huge innovation. Okay, so sometime in the 10th century, so I'm obviously speaking about before Christ, so in the 900s, a young shepherd named Dawid in Hebrew, we call him David, composed a Tehillah, a little song. One Tehillah, two Tehillim, plural. Tehillah. Now you have your words, right? You have your vocabulary sheet that goes with this? Yes. I haven't seen how it was formatted, so mine is pretty rough, but you should have on there the Tehillah, the whole idea of the Sefer Tehillim. So the Sefer means book, Tehillim means hymn or song of praise. So the Sefer Tehillim would be a hymn book or a hymnal, all right? Didn't mean to confuse you all by sending you to the handout, but sometimes they're helpful, especially now in the first introductory one, so you'll be able to kind of follow along with some of the terms that I use. So they're worship songs meant to pour out your heart to God. Originally, it was David by his own lonesome, pouring his heart to God and eventually drawing people in, and when he became king, making it the standard of worship for the nation. Now, we have this period of liturgical singing and composition. Of course, the first songs were written by David, right, and sung by David. But then he continues. He actually appointed some Levitical singers, who we will see in the Psalms. The sons of Korah would be somebody for instance, to take over. And they did. And so their successors, their Levitical successors, priestly successors, continued with composing and chanting and singing well after the return from exile. So we have a period of about 4 centuries, between the 10th century BC, of course, and the 5th century BC, about a span of about 400 or 500 years, in which we have this lively period of creation of liturgical songs. And the liturgical songs reflect the state of mind of the person writing them. So if you're in exile in Babylon, your song is going to be a downer. Okay, your psalm is going to say things like, oh God, why? You know, and why do the wicked prosper? And you're going to sound rather depressed because you're in exile. But if you have returned from the exile and you have been set free, what are you going to do? You're going to praise the Lord. And it is no accident that the last part of the Psalms, book 5 of the Psalms, is mostly Psalms 140 through 150, are all songs of praise, because they kind of reflect periods of time in the life of Israel. Now, is it a linear chronology? Not really. Okay, so I think we can roughly divide the Psalms up into 5 books, and we're going to hit that a little bit later. But you'll see that in certain books there'll be Psalms that have to do with different periods of time. They're not all the same chronological period.